The ink pen paused over the paperwork for precisely 3 seconds before my mother dropped it onto the polished wood surface with a sharp crack that silenced the entire dining room. There was no fear in her action. It was pure triumph. All around us, 50 invitees watched, lifting their sparkling wine glasses, waiting for me to execute the final signature that would legally grant me adulthood and make them wealthy. It was the day of my 18th birthday, the exact date the inheritance trust officially became mine according to state records. My father loomed right beside my mother, keeping a heavy, controlling hand on my shoulder. He bent closer and murmured that I would never regret this choice, that this decision was for my own benefit. And that controlling millions of dollars was an exhausting duty I couldn't handle by myself. A smile crossed his face, but his eyes remained freezing, calculating the financial windfall from liquidating the holdings he and my sibling had spent 6 long years covertly attempting to dismantle. They genuinely believed they had survived until the very end. They assumed the legal authorities' confirmation of their custody was unchangeable. They had absolutely no idea I had been secretly reviewing my grandfather's private correspondence for 3 entire years. They were completely unaware that I had retained my own legal counsel the moment I turned 15. They never suspected what my grandfather was actually accomplishing while he lay ill, confined to his bed, and seemingly helpless. My identity is Chloe Vance. I reach 18 years of age today, and this is the account of how my relatives attempted to plunder the existence my grandfather preserved exclusively for me, only to realize that he had already rigged the match before his passing. Throughout my childhood, my grandfather Arthur represented the solitary stable element in my chaotic household. My father was a sweet-talking financier who constantly borrowed capital and never returned a single dime. My mother was the ultimate high society hostess who accumulated acquaintances rather than genuine bonds. When I reached the age of 12, Grandpa Arthur became desperately ill. The medical professionals diagnosed it as Parkinson's, a degenerative and merciless ailment. He moved straight into our residence so we could oversee his care, an arrangement that sounded honorable on the surface, but in reality meant my parents viewed him as a financial drain. I distinctly recall discovering a medication bottle on the floorboards one evening, totally vacant, right next to his wheelchair. I questioned my mother regarding it. She informed me he was being given strong sedatives to maintain his tranquility. I trusted her words. For 2 long years, I assumed his mind was simply slipping away. I visited his room every single day after my classes ended. I read the daily news aloud to him. He grasped my hand and squeezed it whenever strength permitted, his physical power diminishing with every passing month. Exactly 3 weeks before his departure, he awoke with an unexpected flash of absolute alertness. It was the late afternoon hours. The sunlight filtered through the floating dust particles in his medical room located at my parents' property. He beckoned me over to his bedside. I was 17 at that point, just a freshman in high school. He pulled a thick brown folder from beneath his pillow lining. His hands trembled violently, but his gaze was sharp and intense. Dark brown eyes, mirror images of my own. "Chloe," he whispered hoarsely, "do not allow them to sign any document on your behalf." "Grandpa," I questioned. "On the day you turn 18, he stated deliberately, forcing each syllable out. "They will approach you, accompanied by attorneys. They will claim you require safeguarding. You do not. I have already safeguarded you." He pushed the folder into my grasp. "There is an emergency provision inside. Paragraph 14. Examine it only when the moment comes to use the key." I hid the folder safely inside my coat pocket. That identical night, my mother informed me that Grandpa had lapsed into an unconscious state and would not revive. The following morning, he expired. During the memorial service, my father delivered a speech concerning tradition and bereavement while simultaneously glancing at his smartphone for financial market updates. At the cemetery plot, my sibling shoved me aside to secure the premier position right next to the monument. They laid him in the earth, and they commenced digging for his wealth almost instantly. For 6 long years, I existed like an invisible spirit within their residence. They funded my schooling, but never once showed up for a school play or a diploma ceremony. They gifted me vehicles, but never inquired about my internal feelings. On every single date marking my grandfather's passing, they organized a charitable fundraiser in his memory, selling off possessions that I knew he absolutely despised. They asserted that the collection money went directly to medical studies, but I discovered the financial records during a summer training placement at my father's investment business. The vast majority of the cash was redirected to structural upgrades on the primary estate: a brand new swimming pool, extravagant marble flooring, an entire wing dedicated to my brother's art pieces. Not a single cent went toward Parkinson's research. It was nothing more than a tax avoidance scheme constructed upon a deceased ancestor's name. I remained patient. That was by far the most grueling trial. Every single evening, I unsealed that folder and reviewed the solitary document tucked inside. It designated a legal office based in Boston, an organization I had never previously encountered. A specific attorney, Sarah Jenkins, and an exact date from 6 years prior. Just 2 days following Grandpa's passing, I failed to comprehend its significance until the previous month. I forwarded a nameless message to that specific location. A professional woman named Jenkins sent a reply. She disclosed to me that a covert conference had occurred, a legal dispute conducted in absolute secrecy. She explained that my grandfather had initiated a lawsuit alleging unlawful coercion and asset theft against his son-in-law and daughter, the individuals I refer to as Dad and Mom. While his heart was still beating, he foresaw that an attempt would be made. He was entirely correct. Exactly 2 days prior to my birthday, I met with Sarah Jenkins face-to-face. We sat together inside a cafe on the edge of town, completely removed from my parents' domain. She pushed a bulky document binder across the wooden table. "Your grandfather foresaw this exact date," she remarked. "He recognized they would wait until you achieved legal adulthood but remained dependent on their funds. He submitted a preventative court block 6 years ago. It halts any reallocation of the Vance estate until an autonomous audit proves the heirs are not operating under duress." I gazed intently at the official stamp on the paperwork. The magistrate's signature was finalized 6 years ago. On the day I turned 18, they were legally barred from touching a single cent. Unless they openly confessed to their unlawful actions, tonight represented their ultimate strategy. The fundraising party was merely a front, but the true objective unfolded right here. A secluded dining area. 5 specific observers summoned by my father to give the appearance of legitimacy. Legal professionals from his firm prepared to certify the relocation of management privileges to my parents indefinitely, claiming psychological immaturity issues. They ensured I dined exceptionally well, encouraged me to drink wine, to remain cheerful. They desired me intoxicated enough to append my signature. I consumed only water. I offered smiles. I paid close attention as my father articulated the small details. "It is merely standard paperwork, Chloe," he muttered, tapping the parchment. "We are simply securing your tomorrow." I nodded my head, feigning an analysis of the text while sensing the secret backup phone pulsating within my evening bag. The alert was triggered. Sarah Jenkins was waiting directly outside in her vehicle. The authorities were positioned for action. The judicial decree was fully operational. My mother glanced down at her wrist. "Do you see that everything is prepared?" she questioned gently. "Simply sign your name here." Her words wavered slightly. She was aware that I had cut off communication with them months prior. She was aware that I had relocated secretly into my personal flat. Yet she assumed the promise of wealth would render me vulnerable once more. She believed that 18-year-olds invariably value affection over cold rationality. She had no idea that I preferred the absolute truth. I gripped the writing tool. "Where are you viewing this account from?" Leave a comment below and share if you have ever been forced to battle your own flesh and blood. Because the events that follow are not merely a legal triumph, it marks the utter destruction of their empire. The tip of the pen touched the very first line of the agreement. I pushed down, but the point deflected. The ink supply was completely dry. It was a cheap plastic pen, the sort distributed for free at commercial conventions, but it served perfectly. I had not authorized a single thing yet. I raised my gaze. There is an issue here, I remarked, keeping my delivery perfectly balanced. The entire space fell dead silent. The waitstaff stopped moving near the entranceway. My father grimaced, shifting closer. What sort of issue? It is merely a routine signature, Chloe. I shut my eyelids for a brief moment, recalling the fragrance of my grandfather's floral cologne, recalling the manner in which he gripped my fingers until his final breath. When I unsealed them, the naive girl who adored them had vanished. Only the resilient woman who outlasted them remained. I detected a major flaw in the inheritance structure. I uttered the deception flawlessly. Paragraph 14. My mother's expression collapsed completely. The pigment departed her skin so rapidly she appeared ghostly, almost silver gray. That is outdated data, she stammered out. It has been revised. Has it truly? I inquired because according to the Boston Registry of Wills, that file has remained completely unaltered since June 4th, 6 long years ago. I stood up on my feet. The wooden legs of the chair scraped harshly against the floorboards, echoing loudly throughout the quiet space. I reached deep into my purse and retrieved the heavy brown folder. I dropped it onto the table surface directly in front of my father's chest. He stared at it as though it were a live explosive. Unseal it, I commanded. He sat completely motionless. He threw a quick glance toward my brother, who sat frozen directly across from our positions. He appeared like an individual awakening from a fantasy that he knew was crumbling. My mother dashed forward to grab the document binder, but I snapped my hand down across her wrist. Not violently enough to cause physical harm, just firmly enough to halt her movement. Do not dare, I cautioned. This has ceased to be a negotiation. The entryways at the rear of the space burst open. My father rose instantly to his feet. Who authorized this entrance? He screamed. A woman dressed in a tailored dark outfit stepped inside, escorted by 2 uniformed law enforcement officers. It was Sarah Jenkins. She offered no smile. She gave no greeting gesture. She merely extracted a shield from her coat pocket, not an attorney credential, but an official investigator shield for corporate and financial misdeeds. Richard Vance, she declared, focusing directly on my father. You are officially served with a restrictive prohibition regarding the Vance family inheritance. Any subsequent attempts to manipulate these assets without magistrate authorization will terminate in your immediate detention for grand theft. The invitees gasped in unison. Somewhere in the room, a glass shattered against the floor. My father turned around sharply, his skin turning crimson. This is an absolute farce. She is merely a minor. She stands as the exclusive heir, Sarah interjected, her delivery completely flat. And you are presently the subject of a criminal inquiry for the theft of funds exceeding $4 million throughout the past 6 years. I observed him fall apart. It featured no theatrical shouting. It was a gradual, deflating acceptance of defeat. He dropped heavily back into his seat. My mother commenced weeping, shedding genuine tears on this occasion, the sort triggered by sheer terror. We orchestrated everything for your benefit, she sobbed out. You would have squandered the entire sum. Perhaps I would have, I conceded softly. However, you chose to steal it, and that is a boundary I did not cross. The law enforcement officer moved closer and secured a narrow metallic cuff around my father's wrist. He offered zero opposition. He did not even attempt to stand. He merely fixed his gaze upon me. For a split second, I imagined he might express remorse, perhaps state that he was sorry. Instead, he did not. He shifted his eyes away. He stared directly toward the doorway. They were escorted outside, one after another. My brother loomed behind. He was the youngest sibling. the individual who remained ignorant of the full scheme. He stood up and stepped toward my position. "Did you truly find it necessary to destroy everything?" he murmured. I stared back at him. He was sporting my grandfather's gold band, the piece he claimed to keep for safety because he had lost everything else to wagering. "No," I replied. "I simply preserved it." I scanned the dining room. The invitees were capturing everything on video. Smartphones raised high, digital screens recording the scene. This had ceased to be a private family meal. It had transformed into a public spectacle. "I appreciate your attendance," I proclaimed to the crowd. "The gathering is officially concluded. The beverages are on my account." I extracted my mobile device and dialed my genuine companions, the individuals who possessed zero interest in my financial status. Within 60 minutes, the establishment was entirely vacant save for myself and Sarah. I took a seat once more at the table, the legal agreement still lacking my signature. I filled a glass with sparkling wine. I abstained from drinking it. I merely clutched a piece of ice until it liquefied completely within my hand. The freezing sensation numbed the emotional aftershock. Throughout the subsequent week, the public media exposed everything. Regional news publications printed the details. The Vance family faced intense prosecution for financial deception. My mother was completely cast out from her high society network. My father was stripped of his professional credentials to direct investments. The family estate was put up for public bidding because it was purchased using the stolen funds. I secured the inheritance, not merely the capital, but the absolute governance over it. I liquidated the massive property and purchased a contemporary apartment in the center of the city. Compact, but entirely under my ownership. I transferred 50% of the recovered funds to a Parkinson's research group under my grandfather's name, completely anonymously. The remaining 50% was funneled into an academic endowment fund for youth whose caretakers had abandoned them. I harbored no remaining resentment. Resentment demands mental energy. I was utterly exhausted from wasting energy on their actions. 6 months down the road, I intercepted a letter featuring no return coordinates. Tucked inside was a photograph of my parents, appearing significantly older, weary, resting on a public transit bench in a distant metropolitan area. No written message, no expression of regret. Merely visible confirmation that they resided elsewhere, surviving without my presence. I creased the paper and deposited it into the identical storage space where my grandfather's folder remained. I did not incinerate it. I retained it as a permanent marker, a marker of what I departed from, a marker of what I achieved. I discovered liberty within the ruins. I discovered strength within the stillness. In the present day, I step into corporate sessions without a single tremor. I sport the antique ring my grandfather preserved for me. It aligns perfectly with my finger. I waste no thoughts on who might deceive me next because I am certain of my capacity to outlast it. I am acquainted with the absolute truth. And I recognize that on certain occasions, achieving victory means departing with every single asset, leaving them with absolutely nothing except the emptiness they handed to me. If this account offered you value, press that subscribe button, because particular triumphs require zero public validation. They merely demand internal serenity, and I have finally secured mine. Wherever your location may be, whatever conflict you are enduring, keep in mind, your personal limits establish your value. Defend them with absolute ferocity.